Hello there, and welcome back to my breakdown of the NPCs used in our Werewolf the Apocalypse 20th Anniversary Edition campaign Song of Tara here at Charismatoac. I've so far made it through the werewolves and the leeches and the unknown. I've gone through Clan MacAlpin and I've gone through the Order, and we are now down to the section over here called the Spirits. And the first one is this strange creature, and as you can say, it simply says, "What is this?" The reason for this, of course, is that this is a spirit that the players have only basically met as a cliffhanger at the end of session 13, which was incidentally the last one we recorded. So as of yet, there are no further tidbits of information available on this particular spirit. So I will hurry on to the next one, obviously. This is a very, very important one, possibly the most important one. This is Raven. Raven is the patron spirit of the cairn in St. Stephen's Green, and of all of Raven's Eye Sept, and all of the Raven's Eye Sept pays proper respect to him. Raven spirits are normally spirits of wisdom, but the particular and specific Raven spirit in St. Stephen's Green offers prophecies that are uncannily accurate. He isn't approachable in the normal sense. He doesn't answer when spoken to, except by a select few powerful guru, specifically Ross and Cat. The local Gelfenris believe that there are, in fact, two Raven spirits making their home in St. Stephen's Green. The Phoenix think that they're full of shit. Should add here that obviously this hasn't actually been brought up much in game, but the reason why the Gelfenris tend to believe that there are two Raven spirits is because obviously it's a reference to Odin's two ravens, Hugin and Munin, or Thought and Memory, as the names would be if translated from Old Norse, and because they were known to be messengers and to bring messages from the gods of old to people about their futures and what direction to take in life. Next up, we have this horrible beastie, the snake. The snake is a massive, 3 stories high, hundreds of meters long worm spirit slithering through Dublin North at night. It's capable of regenerating from beyond death, and the werewolves of Dublin are constantly trying to find a way to kill it off permanently. It isn't terribly cooperative with their efforts, however, and tries to eat any guru it comes across. While the guru aren't terribly cooperative in that effort in reverse, the snake is so large that it has all the advantages. Oh, and it's also much, much faster than anything that size should be. But it might be worth adding here that obviously the players haven't actually come across the snake yet, particularly or probably mostly because they haven't actually spent that much time in Dublin North yet. Next up we have the Blood Wolf. This of course is a spirit they have actually encountered. The Blood Wolf is a terrifying wild spirit making his home on the outskirts of Dublin. Only very rarely does he venture into the city itself, but when he does, murder and mayhem ensues. He's extremely dangerous. Even guru are not safe from his predations, though some of the most powerful Thurges have been able to communicate briefly with him. He's clearly a wild spirit, though. There's no taint attached to him, and the local Fianna believe he's a representation of the land of Ireland, hurting and lashing out at the cities that scar the surface of the land. Whatever he is, he's unbelievably dangerous and should not be approached if it can at all be avoided. And as an addendum to that, obviously, the specific guru that he spoke to was not, in fact, either a Thurge or a Fianna. It was Connell, who's an Aroon and a Get of Fenris, and the Blood Wolf in that conversation made some hints that he found it pleasing that the old tribe was back in charge. So there might be something for the players to look into there if they feel like it down the line. So far they haven't actually shown any inclination to go further in that direction. Next up we have Dublin North. This is one of 2 city spirits. City spirits often have very varied appearances in the World of Darkness, but in my particular campaign, Dublin North and Dublin South are two different city spirits, and they both have human-like avatars. Dublin North is a beautiful woman, but untamed, wild, irresponsible, unpredictable, and prone to stab you, though most likely while she's looking at you rather than in the back. One has to have standards. She's unkillable as long as Dublin remains. She's literally the city north of the Liffey, and she can be friendly, wonderful, chatty, full of life, in much the same way the city she represents it. But she is mercurial in the extreme and can switch moods without reason and in the blink of an eye. The Bone Gnawers are on very good terms with her, and she doesn't hurt them. She even tries to help them as best she can. Dublin North is hurting. The pain underneath the veneer of happiness is obvious to anyone who takes more than a cursory glance at her, and she needs help. But she's unsure how to ask for it, and she doesn't know what it is exactly that she needs help with. The Guru of Dublin believe very strongly that she's madly in love with Dublin South, but telling her this is likely to land you the beating of a lifetime. And obviously I'm going to continue on with her opposite number, Dublin South. Suave, debonair, elegant, handsome yet run down behind the surface, rich and above all, safe. They all fit Dublin South. A city spirit representing the part of Dublin located south of the Liffey, he can't be killed so long as the city he embodies remains standing. As it is, he includes all the major financial districts, the most important spiritual places, the most important entertainment centres, most of the best shopping areas, with the exception of Henry Street, the best restaurants, and the most family-friendly residential areas. He's also an arrogant prick who knows exactly how much better than everyone else he is, at least if you ask him. The Werewolves of Dublin knows that he's insanely, madly, passionately in love with Dublin North, but that he's completely unwilling to admit it, and he's also likely to slap you around in a positively civilized, even polite way, while he breaks every bone in your body should you ever suggest this to his face. Next up, we have Mr. Ponsonby. Hundreds of years old, immortal, indestructible, murderous. All of these and many more adjectives fit Mr. Ponsonby, a worm-tainted individual who has been stalking the streets of Dublin since the Dublin gunpowder disaster in 1597. Whether he was responsible or not is anyone's guess, but he's been killed 100 times since then, and he always finds a way to return later on. General consensus is that he's a unique Fomor, perhaps the oldest still in existence in Ireland, and certainly the oldest in Dublin. He's been known to kill agents of the worm as well, however. It seems Mr. Ponsonby doesn't care who you are or what you serve. He'll kill anything and anyone at any time, anywhere, in any way he can. As an addendum, he is listed under spirits because while he may be a Fomor is only that way because they are inhabited by a worm spirit and commonly called a bane. And if he is in fact possessed of such a spirit, he would be, well, he'd be ancient. Most Fomor don't live that long. Well, he might be the exception, of course. And lastly, we have the Liffey. The Liffey divides Dublin North from Dublin South. She's the oldest spirit in Dublin. In fact, she predates Dublin. The Liffey has run through the landscape long before people even lived in Ireland. Sadly, people haven't been good to her. The Liffey used to be one of the loveliest creatures in the Umbra, but these days she's so polluted that she hangs on to her sanity by a thread. The worm is baying at her heels, but she still fends him off, and the werewolves are fighting desperately to help her. If the Liffey is lost, even crossing from Dublin North to Dublin South or vice versa could become a life-threatening enterprise. She knows more about the city than anyone, but she doesn't speak much these days. Her agony is overwhelming and clearly visible to everyone with the slightest spiritual knowledge. People drop their garbage in her in such amounts that by now even swimming a short distance in her waters is seriously unhealthy. The Guru try to clean her up to the best of their abilities, but Banes are constantly on the lookout for them in the vicinity of the river, and they'll attack on sight. I should add here, not so much as an addendum, but as a, call it a point of interest. In real life, the Liffey running through Dublin is in fact terribly polluted. While living in Dublin, I saw people pull everything from common everyday articles of trash to shopping trolleys and a Morris Minor out of the Liffey when it was occasionally being dredged for junk. There used to be a tradition in Dublin that the new students from Trinity College would jump in at Halfpenny Bridge and swim up to O'Connell Bridge, which is a distance of something like 300 yards at most, as a competition on the first day of the year at Trinity College. Nowadays they can't do that anymore. The risk is simply it's simply too unhealthy to swim 300 yards in the Liffey. That's how badly polluted it's become. There was allegedly an attempt to let them swim if they wore wetsuits while I was there. I'm not sure if it worked out that way or not. Next up, we have a handful of mortals. And we will start with Miriam Hansen. Miriam is recently arrived in Dublin from Aalborg, Denmark. She's looking for Fenna and Connell, apparently working for Fenna's family. She's a pleasant woman by all accounts, curious, friendly, polite and unbearably clever. She's asking all the right questions at all the right times, and she's constantly finding hints and clues that point her towards the two Danes. Her actions are lawful, above board, and a matter of record. She's even let the Garda know that she's there to look for the kids on behalf of their parents, and she's being cooperative and helpful in providing the authorities with all the information she's digging up, since obviously they might be able to help her in turn. A real nuisance, in other words. And I've added an edit here, saying that Miriam is 22 years old and is currently staying at an undisclosed location in Dublin. I should have added a further edit saying that she looks younger than her 22 years, and quite a bit younger in fact. She's able to pass herself off as someone in her late teens. And she has actually left Dublin again, although the PCs don't know if this is a permanent or temporary thing. However, she is not a supernatural being, as they can tell, because she was able to pass through the shield that otherwise bars entry and leaving for all manner of supernatural beings. Next up, we have someone the characters haven't encountered yet. I still sort of hope they might one day. Father Gordon. Michael Patrick Gordon is a curiosity in Dublin. He's an ordained Catholic priest and an extremely popular one, but the church would do almost anything to be rid of him. It should be a fairly simple affair too. Simply excommunicating the man would take care of the problem, but something has prevented that from happening so far. So what makes Father Gordon so dangerous? Most importantly, he's calling for the reformation of the Catholic Church. He insists that the message of Jesus has been well and truly lost in gold, glitter, glamour, and garishness, an oft-used expression of his, that the Church has utterly forsaken its primary mission of taking care of the poor, the weak, the downtrodden, and the huddled feckin' masses. Again, his expression. And that this whole feckin' sin fetish that Holy Mother Church has kept going for nigh on 1500 feckin' years has to feckin' stop, on account of not being feckin' funny anymore. It's just hurting people. God is feckin' love. Yes, correct. His expression as well. Now, generally speaking, the Catholic Church doesn't take too kindly to calls for reforms, but Ireland has been so severely rattled by so many atrocious scandals involving the clergy over the last several decades that Ireland as a whole has gone from being one of the most staunchly conservative Catholic countries in Europe to rapidly secularizing, and the Church almost completely losing its grip on the younger generations. Faced with the very real, very dire, and very frightening prospect of losing its major political and social influence in Ireland, the Catholic Church dares not excommunicate Father Gordon, who rants against corruption and abuses within the organization's ranks. Think of him as Pope Francis without the badly veiled homophobia, without the barely glossed over misogyny, and devoid of the fancy palaces, and with a classic Irish temper. Father Gordon has spent quite a few nights behind bars for rowdiness. The whole idea of the meek inheriting the earth, according to him, is more of a guideline than an actual rule. His take on the whole thing is that the nice and the decent and the kind shall inherit the earth, but that those meek feckers who can't be bothered getting off their feckin' arses can't be feckin' trusted with something as feckin' incredible as God's green feckin' earth. Yeah, his words. He's doing a lot of good work. The Bone Gnawers wonder how long he's going to survive before someone squips him off. And next up we have Sig Murphy. Sig Murphy is a woman of slight build in her early 40s. She's usually dressed very casually, and she's never seen without a Cuban cigar within reach. She's also a woman of considerable power in the Dublin underworld. She runs most of the illegal prostitution in Dublin, and the Guru would love to off her for the harm she's doing, but she's aware of their existence and very, very good at masking her whereabouts. Moreover, she's embroiled in a three-way war with two far more mysterious figures for control over the criminal activities in Dublin, and some Guru are arguing that she, at least, is a known evil, whereas the other two are not. One of these unknown factors is believed to control most of the drug trade in Dublin, but almost nothing is known about the last of the three. Zig may be living on borrowed time, but the damage she can do before she goes out to an awful lot of innocent people is considerable. At present, her whereabouts in Dublin are unknown. And we have these two, Suhani and Ajay Krishnamurti. Suhani and Ajay, both from the Andhra Pradesh province of India, were adopted by Irish families as children. It could have been a beautiful story of hope for two orphans, but unfortunately the Catholic agency that facilitated the adoption did not comply with proper screening procedures, and both children ended up in families with severe problems. Suhani ended up being beaten by her adoptive mother, and Ajay was used as little more than slave labor on his family's farm near Cork. They met as adults in a support group for children who had suffered abuse at the hands of their adoptive families, a far too frequent occurrence given the lax policies and almost complete lack of oversight in Irish Catholic institutions in the 1980s and 1990s. However, the story had a happy ending. The couple fell in love, got married, and decided to make a difference. A real difference. With the help of donations from various charitable organizations, a lot of guts, and a complete unwillingness to accept a no when it comes to civil servants, the couple have managed to set up an orphanage with an attached adoption agency. The need for their services is far, far larger than what they can accommodate, and they are constantly struggling to make ends meet. However, their insistence on excluding the Catholic Church or any other religious organization from any kind of influence over their orphanage and how it's run, let alone their adoption agency, means that they are finding it increasingly difficult to make ends meet. The children of Gaia do what they can to support the Fair Chance Orphanage and Adoption Agency as much as possible. It is a source of considerable hope and potential for the children who are fortunate enough to live there. But there are powerful forces at work behind the scenes trying to close the place down. Any help that can be offered is no doubt going to be welcomed with open arms, but the fact that Suhani and Ajay are dreamers means that much of this help would have to happen in secret. And next up, we have W.H. Macmillan. William Henry Macmillan is a politician, and a TD, member of the Irish Parliament, representing Fianna Fáil, the old arch-conservative Catholic party in a nation with a long history of Catholic conservatism. He's young, reasonably handsome, has a good photogenic smile, and morals about as clean as a sewer rat's fur after a particularly shitty day. The Guru of Dublin have tried repeatedly to determine if he was an agent of the worm, but he does not register as more or less tainted than the average human being. It seems like he simply panders to the lowest common denominator in the general population. He's the type who will make people shudder with barely contained glee simply by saying what everyone else thinks, but don't have the balls to say. He's a low-calorie Irish version of Donald Trump with better hair and less spray tan. Next up, we have 4 newcomers in a row. These are, in fact, all Fenna's skater friends. First one is Vic, or Victor Bang. Vic is one of Fenna's skating buddies. He's in his late teens, and the son of a Korean father and an Irish mother. His parents met when his father came to Ireland in the late 90s on a business trip, and, well, he never went back to Korea. Roughly 10 months later, Vic announced his arrival in the world. He's a good skater and an even better friend. Most people are taken aback at his accent, which is typically Irish, and not what most expect from someone with such a distinctive Asian look. He's got a well-developed sense of self-irony, and he's intelligent, but he's useless with technology. There's a standing joke in his small circle of friends that if he so much as touches a cell phone, it'll cease to function. No one is willing to let him handle their iPads after he dropped and ruined 2 in the same afternoon once. He's butterfingered, but give him a skateboard and he'll look like he's defying gravity. The players, by the way, have already named this guy the anti-Taran because of the problematic relationship he's got with technology. Next up, we have Rory St. James. One of Fenna's skater friends, Rory is the most talented performer in the group. If he put his mind to it, he could probably go pro and make a decent living off it. He's cocky, and he can be a bit of a braggart, but he's so damn good that frankly it's hard to blame him. Plus, he's a fundamentally nice guy, and he's willing to teach people a trick or two. Rory's private life is a bit of a mess. His parents are divorced. He lives with his dad since his mother lost custody over him after she was found by one of Rory's teachers with a needle in her arm, totally gone in a heroin stupor. At that point, Rory hadn't been to his South London school for 8 days, and there had been no word. The teacher had gone by to see what was going on, and, well, the rest, as they say, is history. Rory's dad is Irish and brought his son to Dublin. Having an English mother isn't particularly easy when you go through school in Ireland, and to escape the constant taunts and bullying, Rory picked up skating and quickly realized he was brilliant at it. If he's got one flaw, it's that he's got no direction in his life whatsoever. He doesn't seem to have any plan for the future that goes beyond sending dreamy, smouldering glances in Fenna's direction when he thinks she isn't looking. And next up we have Janet Macmillan. Janet Macmillan is the archetypical spoiled rich girl who refuses to be what her parents want her to be, except she's nice, fun, intelligent, occasionally bubbly, and incredibly caring. All the things her father, William Henry Macmillan, isn't. He's a TD, a member of the Irish Parliament, and a thoroughly rotten piece of rot with an extra helping of rot, covered in rot sauce and served up on a rotten plate. How the hell Janet avoided becoming like her dad is anyone's guess, because frankly her mum isn't much better. She drives both her parents up the wall with her antics, and they try to ground her pretty much on a daily basis, only to find out that she's practically impossible to keep in the house if she doesn't want to stay. And that's the thing, she never does. Janet doesn't like her parents. She wants to leave, move away, get her own life going. Not that she really knows what that life is going to include at this time. Her father wants her to study law. Her mother hopes that she'll either become someone's trophy wife or, failing that, perhaps something mundane as the CEO of a major international company one day. No one ever said Mrs. Macmillan had her priorities straight to begin with. And Janet feels like her parents are putting one straitjacket on her after another. It's bound to get ugly sooner rather than later. And then you have Nala Flanagan. Nala is one of Fenna's skater friends. She's the oldest of the group at 20 years of age, and she does tend to take to the older sister role with the others pretty readily. Most of her time is spent with her skateboard somewhere. She's not brilliant at it, but she gets by. From time to time, she'll lament not having started an education, but as soon as someone asks what she actually wants to do with her life, she deflects. She's got a certain sadness clinging to her these days, but she doesn't even allow herself to admit it, and that means her friends can't get her to open up to them either. It's starting to cause some concern with her friends. Obviously, there are a lot more mortals around than just this little handful, but seeing as the players have been involved so far mainly in a storyline, the rite of passage, which mostly dealt with supernatural creatures, this has not been an area that has needed to be expanded upon very readily or very much, at least not yet. I'm kind of assuming that will happen as the campaign continues. Next up, we have the Unquiet Dead. And by that, obviously, for those who might be confused, I am talking about ghosts, also known as wraiths in the world of darkness. And we start out by the most powerful one of the lot, Darky Kelly. No single ghost in Dublin is as horrifying or even half as dangerous as Darky Kelly. In 1761, Dorcas Darky Kelly died a terrible death. She was burnt at the stake. Before that point, she had been a prostitute and brothel keeper, but she was accused, falsely as it turned out, of several terrible crimes. It is true that 6 men died, and that at least one, and that the last one led the authorities to her, but it turns out that she was framed for the murder by a local bloodsucker who needed a convenient scapegoat. He thought no one would care if a whore got executed, and so set Darky up to take the fall for his murderous rampage. He was wrong. Nowadays, no one remembers the sad little vampire that ended up killing Darky, but everyone remembers her. Even mortals know who she was. She was rumoured to have been pregnant by Simon Luttrell, 1st Earl of Carhampton, who was Sheriff of Dublin at the time. He was an exceptionally powerful man and could not be seen to have sired a bastard out of wedlock with a lowly prostitute. But whether the story is true or not is still debated. What is not debated, however, is that Darky died a gruesome, terrible death by first being hung until she choked nearly to death, and then burnt. Dublin's prostitutes held a wake for her, but the authorities, not finished with their destruction of Darky even in death, arrested a number of the women attending the wake for disorderly conduct. Darky did not go quietly into the night. She still hasn't. Vampires have every reason to quake in their boots at her mention. She is very powerful, extremely vengeful, and fully capable of possessions. This includes possessing Guru, whom she feels can help her kill bloodsuckers. While the Guru might be willing to help anyway, Darky doesn't ask permission first. She's an unspeakably powerful geist, and she's driven by a hatred so white-hot it defies all attempts at rationality. All werewolves are advised to stay far, far, far away from her. As an addendum, of course, they had to deal with her because she was involved with Wynda McAlpin. However, now that they are no longer dealing with her over the fate of Wynda, dealing with Darky in the future might not be friendly or cordial. She's not a rational creature. Next up, we have Scorched Aideen. Who Aideen was is a bit of a mystery. No woman by that name is listed anywhere in any records of the time when she died as having perished in a fire, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Victorian Dublin wasn't known for its meticulous records, and before that they were largely non-existent. And judging by what remnants of her clothing are discernible, Aideen predates Queen Victoria by about 100 years. She looks like a woman on fire. There is no light emanating from her flames the flames surrounding her, but she clearly burnt to death. She does not look to have been a particularly wealthy woman, probably someone from the lower middle class, which at the time was a small, relatively insignificant social group. She's still able to set fire to things. She doesn't do so very often, but then again, she isn't seen very often. However, she's begun popping up around Dublin much more frequently lately, and she's generally considered bad news. Every time there's been a major fire in Dublin since the time where she apparently lived, Aideen has been seen beforehand. Some people believe she may have started many of them. Why she appears now is a mystery. Dun dun dun. Next up, we have Mr. Orwell. Mr. Orwell burnt to death when his home went up in smoke in 1954. He was the butler of the manor in which Aaron Blackwell now resides, and was apparently fairly good at his job. He's somewhat snobbish, but in a kindly way, and his disembodied voice can sometimes be heard floating in the rooms. He obviously thinks of Aaron as master of the house, and he's quite happy to go along with the young master, as he refers to him. And we have his counterpoint here, Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris is the groundskeeper at Aaron Blackwell's estates in Deepdale's Bray, or rather he was, when he was alive, before the fire that gutted Deepdale's won. This was all long before Aaron's arrival, of course, but he was apparently a shy, likeable, quiet man who loved the garden and who spoke to the trees a lot, and the flowers. Apparently he had an illicit affair going on with a hortensia. Don't ask, just don't. He's still around. He's still mostly an unobtrusive sort of presence, but as opposed to the rather snobbish butler, Mr. Orwell, who still haunts the main building, Mr. Harris doesn't simply operate on instinct. He's still lucid enough to be spoken to about non-work related topics, and he is aware that he's dead. He remembers dying. Apparently it was very traumatic and very painful. And then we have Finn O'Flynn. Finn would be harmless if it wasn't for the fact that people who encounter him seem to enter a state of deep, deep depression, so maybe not so harmless after all. However, he doesn't seem to mean to do this to anyone, it just happens. Finn was a child labourer in Dublin in the 1890s, working in a weavery. Not many weaveries were located in Dublin or Ireland in general. That particular industry was almost exclusively a Yorkshire thing. But Finn worked in one of the few places that serviced the Irish home market. Sadly, they used machinery that was more than 20 years old, in fact almost 30, and that meant unshielded, moving parts. Finn was one of the lint boys, crawling around underneath the machines to pick pieces of wool off the floor so that it could be bundled up and reused. And he was one of the unfortunate boys who, due to a moment's lapse in concentration, an all too common occurrence in children in general, lost body parts to the machines. In Finn's case, he lost his head. He's been haunting the streets of Dublin ever since, and the sadness surrounding him infects everyone who gets close. Next up, we have Bad Trip. Bad Trip died in the late 1960s or early 1970s. She placed an LSD stamp under her tongue at a hippie party and went into a place of such awfulness and horror that she fled from the apartment where it took place. Everyone else was too stoned or too far gone on trips of their own to realize that she had left. The Garda found her the next day, curled up in a back alley, staring into eternity. Something had scared her to death, literally. Nowadays, it's commonly believed that it was something she saw while tripping. The haunt that now stalks the back alleys of Dublin still sees the same things she saw in those last awful hours of life, and it is bleeding over into reality around her, warping people's perception and, in rare cases, even the actual world around them to fit her maddening visions. She isn't aggressive, rather she's absolutely terrified, but she's uncommunicative and no one has yet managed to get through to her. She's been a lot more active lately, no one seems to know why exactly. Addendum to this is that, of course, the guru actually encountered her and she didn't warp reality around them. This is something that happens to mortals more so than to supernaturals. Next up we have Trisha O'Hara. Trisha scares people to death. Literally. In the mid to late 1800s, Dublin saw a strange malady sweep its streets. People were struck ill, then appeared to die. They became still as corpses took on a deathly pallor and for all intents and purposes were dead. Except they weren't. Several times a quote-unquote corpse would come back to life at the funeral, and after a number of such incidents, people began getting buried with an air vent to their coffins and a small piece of string attached to their fingers going up through the air vent to a bell. This way, if someone did wake up after getting buried alive, they could ring the bell and get dug back out again. This led to the expression, "You look like a dead ringer for," coming into being. People saw friends they thought were dead walking the streets of Dublin and were confused. No one attached a piece of string to Tricia's finger. She wasn't wealthy and her family could not afford special considerations at her funeral. Now she walks the streets of Dublin at night, looking for a way home to her family, except the house no longer exists, her family are long dead, and Tricia sometimes manifests to ask passerbys for directions. At least 17 people have died over the years from sheer fright from this experience. This, of course, is the girl, I should add here, who gave the players, and particularly Aaron, such a horrible scare on Wolfton Square on one of the earlier nights of game, where she popped up, tucked on his sleeve, and went, "Excuse me, sir, do you know the way home?" And then dragged him into the ground, or at least it felt for him like he was being dragged into the ground. So yes, she is a frightening little thing. Next up, we have the First. The First is new in Dublin. No one knows precisely who this creature was in life, but it's currently working with the entity known as the Last. It is known as the First because it introduced itself as such, leading to a variety of theories about it being the first man killed at the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, which would tie it with the Last, who was the last man killed there, but no one knows the truth. The fact that it speaks an understandable Irish would seem to contradict the theory. The First is looking for someone or something, and in the process of doing so is killing people at a disconcerting pace around Dublin. Strangely, the Garda seem to pay very little attention to these deaths, as if they are unaware that people are, in fact, getting murdered. No one knows why these people are getting killed or what ties them together. No answer has been forthcoming from the First either. And of course the players actually saw this creature when they found their dead friends. They also saw this fellow, the Last. The Last is one of the most frightening entities in Dublin. There are stories of him going back 1001 years to 1014 and the Battle of Clontarf. It is believed that he was the last man to die at that particular battle, hence the name. He speaks in no language understood by modern people, but he doesn't need to. His mere presence makes water freeze and breath grow frosty. He can kill with a touch, and he has killed a lot. That said, he's also been missing from Dublin for almost 100 years. The last time he was seen for certain was in the aftermath of the Easter Rising in 1916, when he was observed by several supernatural beings, guru, mages and Cithane alike, at Kilmainham Jail immediately after the execution of James Connolly, the last of the leaders of the rebellion executed by British forces. Why he has reappeared is anyone's guess, but he's been seen, and he's accompanied by a newer creature of similar appearance to himself, who seem to be seeking out and killing specific people around Dublin. No one has yet worked out why these people specifically are killed. Nothing seems to connect them. And then we have the Bosun. Before I even get started on this one, Tally's player wants to go find this ghost so bad it hurts. The others have, as of yet, managed to keep him from making good on his, I don't know if I should say promise or threat to go looking for this ghost. The boatswain sailed with Captain Edward England in the early 1700s, plundering and looting along the African coast. Edward England was marooned by his crew by his former quartermaster John Taylor, who commanded another ship in Edward's squadron. The boatswain was the boatswain on Taylor's ship and followed his captain into mutiny. The result, however, was more than the boatswain had bargained for. He was the one who pushed Captain England out of the boat and onto the shore on the island where he and 3 of his loyal crewmates were marooned, and in doing so he earned a curse from the hapless pirates, which still sticks to him. He walks the harbour front of Dublin every night, and while he looks terrifying, he's mostly harmless. However, he does tend to follow anything supernatural around, singing loudly at the top of his voice. He's not a bad singer, but he can manifest his voice, making it incredibly hard for people who might want to sneak around quietly for whatever reason to do so. Oh, and he smells strong alcohol. Literally, one smells him before one sees him. And next up, we have the Torn Man. The Torn Man is fettered to Wolfton Square. His story is known only in fragments, but what is known is tragic enough. Before the area was known as Wolfton Square, named after a famous Irish revolutionary, it was a cemetery during the British rule over Ireland. The Torn Man's family was buried there after the great outbreak of cholera in 1832. His mind shattered at the loss of his entire family, wife, children, parents and all. He sat there for several weeks, only eating when someone took pity on him and brought him food, soiling himself in his madness, sleeping on the spot where he had sat down beside his family's headstone. Eventually, one morning, he was found dead, not from exposure, hunger, or disease, but from having been torn to shreds as if by a wild beast. The Guru of Dublin have speculated that he was attacked by a black spiral dancer, who was part of a pack that made life miserable for the local guru in the 1830s and 1840s. Whatever the truth is, the Torn Man did not rest easily. But things did not get truly tragic until the 20th century, when the cemetery was stricken from the records. The gravestones were all moved to one end, stacked against one another along a wall, with their writing hidden against each other, so as to preserve it for future historians who might need to investigate them. The cemetery was covered in asphalt and a children's playground was built. No one uses it. Wolfton Square is known as the most haunted place in Dublin, and Dublin has a reputation as one of the most haunted cities in Europe. The Torn Man is one of these spooks, and perhaps the best known, since the sheer awful tragedy he experienced clings to him. He can't find his family's headstone anymore. They've all been moved, and he can't read the text on them any longer. It's only deepened his despair. There are many other ghosts in Wolfton Square, but none so visible and so manifest as the Torn Man. And an addendum here at the end of this is that this is in fact part of the story of real life Dublin as well. Wolfton Square is commonly called the most haunted place in Dublin, and the headstones are in fact still there, lined up against a concrete wall on one end of the area. This is not an uncommon method of preserving headstones when a gravesite is cancelled in Ireland. It has happened in other places in Dublin as well, and everywhere it happens. The headstones are preserved literally by placing them up against the wall, back to front to back to front to back to front, so that the text is preserved on all of them. And I am not going to read out the mages. The reason for this is that the mages are in fact based on real life people, and while they will be brought up occasionally in game, I do not want to subject them to me retelling them like that. These are friends of mine. There are more mages than are listed here, and they are still friends of mine from Dublin. and consequently it would not be prudent of me to do such a thing. However, I'm going to continue on with the Cithane, and we shall start here. This is Jocelyn Summers Winters. Jocelyn is American, which is very clear to anyone who speaks to her for more than 2 seconds. She speaks with a thick drawl. She smiles almost constantly. And she runs a small pastry, cookies, coffee, tea, goodies, candy, delicatessen, Americana pie shop in Ranelagh. She's out of the centre of Dublin, but close to where families and young people like to live, and she's got a large clientele. Everyone seems to leave her place happier and more upbeat. Big difference. More upbeat than they entered. She plays jazz and blues music on her stereo, even the occasional bit of soul, and she apparently always got time to talk. Even, perhaps especially, when someone looks like they're down on their luck. Everyone likes Jocelyn. St. Patrick's Cathedral is neutral ground by official agreement, but if anyone makes trouble in Jocelyn's shop, they're likely to have a slavering, rabid, rampaging horde of supernatural creatures of all stripes and types chasing them across Ireland and off the cliffs of Moher. It's a long drop, and there's nothing but Atlantic Ocean between the cliffs of Moher and Newfoundland. Let's just say people don't make trouble in Jocelyn's shop. It's called Summer and Winter, by the way. She's inventive like that. Next up, we have a person here whom the players have not actually met. His name is Aidan, Lord of the Causeway. Aidan is she of high rank and standing within Queen Miriam's court. He holds the rank of Duke, and his domain covers most of the Ulster provinces to the north. He's also caught in Dublin. Having gotten stuck there after answering his queen's urgent summons to help defend Tara, he is now unable to leave the city entirely. His domain is currently under the stewardship of his wife, the Lady Roisin, and while he trusts her implicitly, he fights with an embittered fury in the hopes that whatever is barring him from returning home will vanish once Tara is truly safe. He has brought with him only 3 other warriors, much to his shame, but the majority of his forces were meant to follow once they were fully mustered. To Aidan's chagrin, the mystical force keeping supernaturals from leaving Dublin or from entering it from the outside came down before this happened. He is a deeply honor-bound, utterly loyal man who will die for his queen and his duty without a moment's hesitation. He's also one of the finest warriors that the Sidhe can muster anywhere in the world. His gilded plate armor is inlaid with silver, and his sword is forged from the same material, bound and kept sharp and hard by powerful Cithane magics. His mystical abilities are said to be second only to Queen Miriam herself. He is a terrifying foe, arguably the match of any Garou in Ireland, and having him at Tara may very well be what keeps the cairn from falling. So, yeah. This guy is like the ultimate elven knight. Next up, we have Blue Satin. And all I can say to that picture is long live World of Warcraft, finally somebody makes blue trolls. Blue Satin, or Silke Rademacher as her given name is German, and her nickname, as it should be obvious, is a play on words relating to her first given name. She's unapologetically unseelie and has fuck all time for the prissy, snooty, fancy-pantsy courts of Mirren and her boot-licking toadies. Blue Satin refuses to bow to anyone, and she's daring the Cithane at Mirren's court to come and make her. So far, none of those who have tried have succeeded. She is as troll as trolls can get. She doesn't bow to the Shadow Court either, and anyone daring to call her an ogress is likely to need major dental surgery or eat every meal for the rest of their lives through a very thin straw. But this also means that she maintains honor. She simply refuses to acknowledge higher authority. A weaponsmith by trade, she can forge weapons no Garou in Ireland can possibly match. Her swords and axes are in hot demand, even with the Cithane surrounding Mirren. She carries a heavily ensorcelled horseman's pick as her private weapon, and she isn't afraid to use it. There are still witnesses around who can attest to her having literally turned a leech's head into a red mist with one blow. She charges absurd prices for her work, and it's highly unlikely that she'd work for the Guru for something as simple as money or favors owed. It's not that she dislikes them, it's the fact that she doesn't trust them for some reason. Next up, we have Ora O'Flynn. Ora is easily the most approachable Cithane in Dublin. He's friendly, gregarious, easy to get a laugh out of, always ready with a compliment, a drink, a grand tale, a song, a dance, or a jolly good fuck if that's what takes your fancy. The problem is that he always leaves everyone and anyone he spends time with, in any capacity, completely drained of energy for days, even weeks afterwards. His victims, quote unquote, however, seems to think it's a trade-off worth the exhaustion. It should probably be said about Ora that Fenna still has a bit of a crush on him, and seems to think that, yeah, it might, for a jolly good rump with that guy, the exhaustion would be worth it. Next up, we have Egir Fjellstad. I'm going to see I've misspelled his name here. Oh, good grief. Egir is Norwegian. He's also very tall, and according to Odd, he's blue. Oh, and apparently he's a troll. Depending on the man's mood, this can be a good thing or a really, really bad one. Keeping him and Eric Holmgren apart, especially during winter, and particularly on full moons during a winter, is a priority and one every guru would do very, very well to heed. Eric disagrees. Egir's opinion on the matter is unknown. Massive destruction is likely to happen, likely with considerable loss of life, of innocent life in the process. And I've added an edit here saying that Egir is banned from entering St. Stephen's Green after the death of Odd O'Brien on the night of Friday the 17th of July 2015 due to his ongoing enmity with Eric Holmgren. The Cithane do not want to risk conflict between their people and the Guru growing from a confrontation of that sort, especially not when everything in Dublin appears to be in a state of flux. Next up, we have Miela Hayes. Miela is a strange one. Bubbly, happy, and almost excessively extroverted. And she's apparently capable of out-ragabashing a ragabash. She spends a lot of time in the dreaming as well. She seems harmless enough, except no Fae are ever truly harmless. And there's an edit here. On her, despite taking an immediate liking to the pubs upon first meeting them, Miela was also devastated to learn of Odd O'Brien's death on the night of Friday the 17th of July 2015. She did, however, facilitate an audience with Banry and Mirren. During this meeting, she revealed an ability to physically transform herself into a small grey squirrel. Next up, we have Liadan. Her name meaning grey lady in Irish, and she's an enigma. She has no contact with the court in the Bleeding Horse, and none of the Fae of Dublin have any known association with her. Odd knows very little of her, but he refers to her as the Bane She, and he is deathly afraid of her. Her exact whereabouts are unknown. And for those who are listening who are not familiar with the original legend, of course, the She are, well, I hate to use the word elves because it's such a fantasy sort of thing, but they were, for lack of a better alternative word for it, they were the original elves as part of Celtic lore and legend. They were not fluffy, they were not happy-go-lucky tree-hucking creatures. They were incredibly dangerous, insanely skilled warriors. They were brutal in the extreme. They were forces of nature more than anything else. And they were typically, the best of them were known as the Ish She, the High Elves. They would probably translate that too in modern English. Again, I do think that the word elf is a misnomer here, but for lack of a better one. However, when one of them went bad, they became what is known as the Banshee. And these creatures, when they went bad in such a way, could kill with their voice. And of course, they are the foundation of the modern legend of the Banshee. It's simply a slightly different way of pronouncing the same thing. Next up, we have Kiva, Doc O'Shaughnessy. Kiva O'Shaughnessy is one of the local Cithane. According to Odd, she's reasonably approachable during the half of the year during summer, and the most foul-mouthed, obnoxious, infuriating bitch during winter. She's also one of the most skilled crafters in Dublin. You need a custom gun, Doc will set you up. You need your car personalized and tuned, Doc will fix it. Need your pocket watch turned to atomic clock standards, Doc can do so blindfolded, but for Gaia's sake, don't ask her to handle electronics. She'll use that tuned, personalized car to run your ass over, then blow your hairy ass to kingdom come by using the custom gun, and then kick your ass while you're down to the tick-tock from that pocket watch ringing in your ears. And that's during summer. You don't want to know what she's going to do to your ass involving car, gun, and clock if it's winter. Really, you don't want to know. You really don't. And don't think she couldn't. Slender strip of a girl she may be, but she's also several hundred years old. Only Mirren is older among the Cithane of Dublin. Woe betide the poor sucker, brings up her age, by the way. Gun, car, clock. Don't say you weren't warned. Next up, we have Lunja. Lunja serves as one of two primary bodyguards to Mirren. She is the twin sister of Afalkai, and she says as little as her brother does. Like her brother, she fights with two silvered scimitars. Silver or not, the Guru of Dublin know that these weapons can and will cause outrageous, almost unhealable damage to anyone struck by them. Why she has settled in Dublin with her brother so far away from home is anyone's guess. It's said that she can enter the dream of anyone who finds women attractive, and that the damage she does while there will be real. A memory destroyed by Lunja in someone's dream is a memory lost forever. And her brother, Afalkai. Afalkai serves as one of two primary bodyguards of Mirren. He is the twin brother of Lunja, and he says as little as his sister does. Like his sister, he fights with two silvered scimitars, silver or not. The Guru of Dublin know that these weapons can and will cause outrageous, almost unhealable damage to anyone struck by them. Why he is settled in Dublin with his sister so far away from home is anyone's guess. It's said that he can enter the dream of anyone who finds men attractive, and that the damage he does while there will be real. Memory destroyed by Afalkai in someone's dream is a memory lost forever. So basically he and his sister are basically male and female version of the exact same thing. Next up we have Tula. Tula is a mystery. An absolute and complete mystery. It is believed, but not said out loud, that she's Mirren's daughter, but if so, they are certainly different kinds of Cithane. They have very little in common, to say the least. Tula has made herself popular in the local underground and goth scene in Dublin, but she does not trust easily, and anyone trying to engage her in conversation had best beware their dreams, their thoughts, and their fears do not all join forces to lay them low. She's powerful, enigmatic, and very, very difficult to get close to. Most people wouldn't really want to anyway. She has a slightly musty scent clinging to her. Second to last, we have Gazon Rouge. Gazon is one of the least secretive Cithane in Dublin. He just doesn't have the temperament to stay quiet or hidden away, and he runs his crew like a drill sergeant would run his outfits. His employees are usually keeling over from exhaustion, but they are paid well, and the business is incredibly successful as a result. For the record, Gazon is a chef. At the restaurant Patrick Guilbeault, the most costly place to eat in all of Dublin. His food is excellent, in fact outstanding, but his mercurial temperament is infamous. It is once said he shouted a certain angry and famous TV chef down into the ground and made him crawl back to the production truck in tears. Gazan has neither confirmed nor denied this story, since it pays to keep people guessing. And last but in no way least, we have Miran O'Leary. Yes, another O'Leary. There are many of them in Dublin. Miran is the Banrian, or Queen of the Fae of Dublin. Despite her name, to the best of anyone's knowledge, she's not actually related to Siobhan O'Leary of the Raven's Eye set. There are simply an awful lot of O'Learys in Dublin. That being said, probably only Odd of all the Guru really knows anything apart from the very basics about Miran. There is a common consensus that she is the single most powerful supernatural creature in Dublin, and more than a few have compared her to the ancient, semi-mythological figure of Queen Maeve. It is common knowledge that if she ever shows someone her true appearance, there is a good chance they will be struck mad by the sight. But that is nothing compared to what she will do to people's dreams. And I've added an edit. Having been approached by the pubs on the night of Friday the 17th of July 2015 following the murder of Odd O'Brien, Miran has accepted, at least for the time being, that Shiva is the new point of contact between the Cithane and the Guru. She has also offered the swords of her knights in defense of Tara, and she has informed the pubs that the Cithane of her court will lend what material support they can to the investigation into the death of their friend and ally Odd, with the caveat that she expects them not to abuse this boon. And just to add to that, of course, now the players have actually solved that murder. That particular offer is no longer in effect. That said, Miran's knights are still fighting at Tara and will continue to do so. So these are the Cithane. We are almost through the whole list, and I am going to do another short video on these just to catch up with the last ones, and then obviously there are going to be more added as play continues, and I will probably be handling those by doing follow-up videos to this one later on. If this has been of any use to you in any kind of way, perhaps giving you some inspiration for NPCs of your own, or if you have questions, please add them to the comments fields below, but as usual I will ask you to be kind about it. Thank you very much.